Hi, my name is Robbie Stewart. I'm a graduate from Carleton University's Vertebrate Paleontology program, and today I'm going to be talking about terrestrial and modern crocodiles. Just as there were crocodiles that we looked at before that went entirely into the ocean, there were also some crocodiles that evolved to go the other direction, entirely onto the land. These crocodiles were not true crocodiles, Eusuchians, which we will talk about shortly, but an entirely different group of crocodiles called Notosuchians. Although we know that Notosuchians evolved during the Jurassic, for many years we didn't actually have any Notosuchians from the Jurassic period. We had their ancestor, Protosuchus, so we know that creatures like Protosuchus must have continued on to radiate out into all the different species of Notosuchian from the Cretaceous that we already know, but we don't actually have any Notosuchians from the early to late Jurassic except for one, which was only discovered very recently in 2004. Thus, we have what is called a ghost lineage, which is when scientists know that animals we haven't discovered yet living between an ancestor and their descendants that have been found many millions of years later, a gap in the fossil record that we're still struggling to fill. Maybe in our lifetimes we'll find more of these early Notosuchians, these terrestrial crocodiles, to help fill in the pieces. The only Notosuchian we have from the Middle Jurassic is a Madagascar crocodile, but it wasn't like the small Protosuchus style crocodiles that we expected. Instead, it was this strange specialized animal, a giant, the apex predator of its environment. This 7-meter giant, the size of a minibus, was called Razanandrogoby and was equipped with a set of jaws with muscles and teeth similar to Tyrannosaurus rex. Now, they weren't just similar to Tyrannosaurus rex because they were big and the teeth were sharp, but because the teeth have patterns of wear on them, on the teeth themselves, that show they were colliding with bone. This creature had the bite force and the tooth penetrating power to crush the bones of the animals that it was eating, which we think were probably the sauropods living in Madagascar at the time. Razanandrogoby was able to get as big as it was because it was living on an island. Madagascar was still an island back in that time. During the Middle Jurassic, most of the apex predators were theropod dinosaurs, but in Madagascar there were no theropod dinosaurs, only the crocodiles that had managed to swim across to Madagascar at that point. And so, Razanandrogoby was the apex predator of the region. Eventually, theropod dinosaurs would spread to Madagascar, and giants like Razanandrogoby would go extinct. But the smaller Notosuchians that we don't have fossils of, their ghost lineage, would spread all over the southern hemisphere of the Mesozoic. South America, Antarctica, Australia, Africa, all of the continents that were shoved together in this one supercontinent called Gondwana. The crocodiles would spread all across it and start radiating into new, different types of niches, some of which are nothing like crocodiles alive today. The next Notosuchians we find show up with fully formed specialized adaptations, already having very specialized roles in their niches. Most crocodiles alive today only have one type of teeth, but Notosuchians were notable for evolving multiple different types of teeth. Chimaerosuchus from the Cretaceous of China had buck teeth in the front of its mouth and molars like a rabbit in the back of its mouth for chewing up the food after it had snipped it with its incisors. But some Notosuchians were even more specialized. Yacerarani, also from the Cretaceous of China, had longer incisors that would have jutted out of its mouth, and it also had overlapping molars, the same way that mammal molars are overlapping inside of our teeth. This would have let them chew more effectively or grind up their food. A crocodilian called Pachysuchus had these muscles specialized for chewing, and it also had a gap in its teeth that suggests that it would have had a fleshy nose, sort of like a dog, at the end of its muzzle. A dog-nosed crocodile with chewing cheek teeth is not something that we usually think of when we picture a crocodile, but these kinds of crocodilians were commonplace all across the Mesozoic, living in niches that we expect of mammals like rabbits, cats, and even rats. But crocodiles would evolve even more extreme adaptations that look even less like the animals that we have today. Simassoucus, also from Madagascar, but this time from the late Cretaceous, had a pug-nosed face that was compressed up against its face. It also had a short, stubby tail that was covered in armor. It had rounded plates of armor along its back, and it would have been a herbivore entirely, one of the only purely herbivorous crocodiles known in the fossil record. Simassoucus had short, stubby front legs that are positioned in such a way that scientists think they were adapted for digging, so it would have been able to dig burrows, like modern-day rabbits are able to. Simassoucus also had maple leaf-shaped teeth, which are found in iguanas today to help them chew plant food. Even more extreme armor was found in a Nodosuchian from the Cretaceous of South America called Armadillosuchus. Armadillosuchus had banded plates of armor running along the length of its entire body, as well as on the top of its head. Armadillosuchus was about the size of a coyote, which is big for the modern day, but during the Cretaceous period was a very small animal. These banded plates of armor would have been perfect for helping protect it from top predator dinosaurs that it shared the region with. Armadillosuchus was insectivorous, following the trend of these crocodilians filling niches that for whatever reason the dinosaurs themselves were not filling. Another example of this trend is Anatosuchus from Egypt, which had a flat, duck-shaped mouth that would have been adept for dabbing in the water and filtering out small insects the way that modern-day ducks do. Even the gigantic Razanandrogoby from Madagascar follows this trend, having evolved in the absence of large theropod dinosaurs. But this would happen again in the Cretaceous. In South America, all of the medium-sized theropods went extinct. There are no ceratosaurs or big dromaeosaurs that were specialized for taking on medium-sized prey that are found in South America, and so crocodiles evolved to fill this niche too. Barusuchus was a massive crocodilian about the size of a bear, which had shearing saber teeth in its mouth, adapted for chasing after and taking down medium-sized prey. Things too small for the top predator abelisaurids and carcharodontosaurids of the time period, but perfectly sized for a crocodilian of such a massive size itself. You can see here the adaptations for Barusuchians, like Barusuchus itself here. They had long legs built for galloping or running after their prey, tucked directly under their body like a dinosaur or a mammal. And they had razor-sharp serrated teeth in their mouths, built for cutting through meat rather than grabbing prey. For grabbing prey, they had these specialized saber fangs in the under part of their jaw and in the top part of their jaw. Larger Barusuchians are found in places with no medium-sized dinosaurs to fill the niche, but in places where abelisaurids got smaller or raptor dinosaurs got bigger, the Barusuchians shrunk down in order to avoid competition with the medium-sized dinosaur predators. But even serrated razor fangs and armor like Armadillosuchus had could not save the Nodosuchians from the extinction event that wiped out the dinosaurs. But even then, some Nodosuchians survived the extinction event. That's right, there were terrestrial crocodiles galloping after prey during the Age of Mammals. We'll talk more about them in our Cenozoic crocodile discussion, which will happen at a later date. These medium-sized predatory Nodosuchians probably would have eaten their smaller insectivorous and herbivorous relatives like Armadillosuchus and Pachysuchus. But even saber fangs and armor were not enough to save all of the Nodosuchians from the extinction event that wiped out their competitors. The Barusuchians went completely extinct at the end of the Cretaceous period, as did most of the other terrestrial crocodiles like Armadillosuchus. But a family of Nodosuchians from the same stream as the Barusuchids survived, the Sebecids, and unlike any other terrestrial predator from the Mesozoic, kept on during the Age of Mammals, just as it had during the Age of the Dinosaurs. There's so little change between the giant Barusuchus that exists at the end of the age of the dinosaurs and the even bigger Barinasuchus, which was the top predator of South America during the age of the mammals in the Paleocene. We'll catch up with these giants when we focus on crocodiles in the Cenozoic in another video. Sometimes these types of crocodilians are all found in the same location, the extinct relatives of modern crocodiles alongside more modern relatives, all living in the rivers, the oceans, and on land together. And we had the opportunity to look at some of these fossil crocodilians when we visited the Canadian Museum of Nature's research collection. These three skulls all come from crocodiles that lived at the same time and the same place, the early Cretaceous of Egypt. But all three of these crocodilians were actually adapted to different environments. This crocodile, Eryprosuchus, lived on land. This crocodile, Sarcosuchus, lived in rivers. And this crocodile, Elosuchus, lived in the oceans. Each of them had different adaptations to allow them to live in the oceans, the land, or the rivers. Eryprosuchus had these tiny teeth, which would have been needle-like if they were set in the jaws of this lower jawbone, and were used for catching smaller animals like invertebrates that it would have been chasing down in its environment. Eryprosuchus had legs tucked directly under its body, like a mammal or a dinosaur, to help it run faster when chasing after its prey, and it might have lived a more active lifestyle than other crocodilians did. Elosuchus here, in the meantime, had a long, thin snout, which would have been filled with needle-like fishhook teeth when it was alive. These teeth would have been perfect for catching the prey in its environment, and Elosuchus would have had a long and paddle-like tail to help it swim, and a streamlined body that was extremely elongated to let it move back and forth through the water more efficiently. Elosuchus would have been much, much bigger than Eryprosuchus. Eryprosuchus would have only been about the size of a cat, as you can see from this lower jawbone here. While Elosuchus over here could have been as much as 7.7 meters, which would have made it the size of a large vehicle like a van. But even Elosuchus would have been dwarfed by the gigantic Sarcosuchus imperator, which lived in the same environment. A titanic crocodile that looked very much like the freshwater crocodiles that we know today, and was adapted in much the same way, but would have been up to 10 meters long, or about the size of a bus. You can see from the skulls of Eryprosuchus and Sarcosuchus just how much bigger Sarcosuchus would have been than Eryprosuchus. These are the same bones from the same part of the animal, but here you can see how much smaller Eryprosuchus would have been. The teeth also give us an indication. Sarcosuchus's teeth were extremely long and peg-like, designed to be able to grab into an animal, puncture it, and then drag it into the water in order to feed like crocodilians do. Sarcosuchus was so big, and its teeth designed for grabbing prey that were so large, that it was probably adapted to attack animals like bus-sized coelacanths that it would have lived alongside, or even dinosaurs that it would snag from the land as it was sitting in the water. Just like a modern-day crocodile snatches up wildebeest but also lives on the fish that live in its river systems. Despite their diversity, none of these three crocodile species would survive to the modern day, nor would any of their extended relatives or family. In fact, none of these animals actually have surviving relatives. Phyllitosaurs like Sarcosuchus would actually go extinct at the end of the Cretaceous era, along with most of the other dinosaurs. But dirosaurids like Elosuchus and Notosuchians like Eryprosuchus would actually continue into the age of mammals and survive to live alongside them. Dirosaurids would go extinct during the same cooling event that wiped out relatives of the terror birds, while Eryprosuchus and its family would survive all the way up until the middle of the Cenozoic in the same extinction event that wiped out the giant terror birds, and the start of which finished off the entelodons. But none of the crocodiles that are presented here are actually crocodilians that have survived into the modern day. caimans, alligators, and crocodiles and gharials, none of these families actually have very much in common with these extinct crocodiles that were so diverse and successful during the Mesozoic. The last group of crocodilians to evolve were the ones we're familiar with in the modern day, the Eusuchians. Some of these true crocodilians grew to gigantic sizes even this early on. The most famous prehistoric crocodile of them all, Deinosuchus, was a 11 to 13 meter long giant crocodile that lived at the end of the Cretaceous period. It would have lived exactly the same way that a Nile crocodile does, but it would have been preying on ceratopsians and duck-billed dinosaurs instead of water buffalo and zebras. We know that Deinosuchus did this because we found gouges in the tail marks of hadrosaurs that show the giant crocodilian's teeth had bitten into them to drag them into the water. We also have found giant prehistoric turtle shells about the size of a person that have been crushed by the teeth of a gigantic crocodile. Deinosuchus has been found in both ocean environments and in rivers, suggesting that like modern saltwater crocodiles, it was able to move between the ocean and fresh water depending on what it wanted to prey upon. Deinosuchus went extinct at the end of the Cretaceous alongside most of the other dinosaurs, but most of its relatives among the true crocodiles did not. If anything, they barely seemed to notice the extinction event. And just like at the end of the Triassic extinction, when they radiated out from under the shadow of all of their extinct relatives, crocodiles and their surviving cousins would adapt to thrive on land, in the rivers, and in the oceans once again. We'll catch up with these crocodilians and how they flourished and adapted to become more successful than ever alongside the other Cretaceous extinction event survivors in the next video on Cenozoic crocodiles.